Representative Howlett, if you could lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, if the members could introduce themselves, starting with Representative Howlett.
Representative Clint Owlett. I should serve the 68th Legislative District, which is all of Tioga and the western half of Bradford County.
I'm Representative Josh Kale, Beaver, Washington Counties.
Representative Joe Ham, Lycoming and Sullivan counties.
Good afternoon, everyone. Representative Robert Ledbetter, representing the 109th District, consisting of all of Columbia County.
We will also have other members joining us here today, but I also wanted to recognize that we have with us virtually, and we'll have members pop in and off virtually as well. Representative Smith, Jefferson County, Representative Eckert from Adams County. Gentlemen, you know the rules. Keep your computers muted. Unless you have a question, raise your hand. Otherwise, Representative Ham, thank you for having us here in Lycoming County. I appreciate your hospitality. If you'd like to make brief opening statements, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome to the 84th District. The 84th District comprises most of Lycoming County, the largest geographical county in this Commonwealth, and all of Sullivan County. The 84th District is the fourth largest district in the House of Representatives, and I may be a bit biased, but I believe the 84th District is the most beautiful scenery in this Commonwealth. It's my great honor to represent the great people of the 84th District. Today, we're here to discuss a very important issue here in the Commonwealth, preserving benefit integrity. And here's why it's important. If we have accountability and integrity in our benefit programs, there's going to be more money for those who truly need it. Our seniors, single parents who are working hard to make ends meet, and they're just looking for a hand up. So we need to have accountability and integrity in our programs. Human Services line item accounts for 42% of our state budget. I'll say that again, 42% of our state budget, $19.1 billion. We're seeing about a 5.2% growth year over year in the Human Services line item, nearly $1 billion added a year. The federal government matches those numbers, almost 50-50 split, so we're getting nearly $19 billion from the federal government in these programs. Our governor, Governor Josh Shapiro, made a statement when he was Attorney General that there was, in his estimate, $3 billion worth of fraud in our welfare system. And so today we're here to talk about preserving our benefit integrity here in the Commonwealth. And so I thank you for being here, and thank our testifiers for being here to talk about this important issue. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Ham. You know, one of the things I found interesting when I came to Harrisburg was how elected officials love talking about the different programs that they advocated for, things that we quote-unquote accomplished. And there's just not that many people checking in to see whether or not we actually did accomplish them, whether or not we're actually fulfilling the promises that we made to our constituents. Look, I think there's a recognition that there needs to be a social security net, or social safety net, excuse me. But whether or not that net is actually working is another matter. And it's something that we have to be willing to test and have to be willing to trust. And the public fisc is a public trust, and we need to be ensuring that we are doing everything that we can, because at the end of the day, it's not our money. It's not our money to play with. It's not our money just to give out. It's taxpayer dollars, and we need to make sure that those taxpayer dollars are being spent in the right way. So I'm looking forward here to discuss how to achieve excellence in government through increased government accountability and transparency, all the while preserving benefit integrity. And as I've been talking, Representative Rowe has joined us. Representative Rowe, thank you for being here. If you'd like to briefly introduce yourself, and we'll start testifying.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm Representative David Rowe from the 85th Legislative District. That is Union, Snyder, Juniata, and Mifflin counties. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Thank you, Representative Rowe. Today we have two testifiers joining us. They will both share insight into their benefit fraud concerns and how we can maintain public confidence and effectiveness in these programs. Each testifier will share with us their brief testimony, approximately 3 to 5 minutes. I've never gavelled anybody out, but try and keep it within that time frame. And then we'll open it up for questions, and we'll have a good discussion from there. Our first testifier is Sam Adolphson, the Policy Director of the Foundation for Government Accountability, and then Roy Leonardson, the Director of State Government Affairs for the Foundation for Government Accountability. Gentlemen, the floor is yours.
All right, Representative, thank you very much. My name is Sam Adolphson, Policy Director at FGA, the Foundation for Government Accountability. We work in about 30 states and in Washington, D.C., and we really focus on making sure that the safety net is protected for the people who need it most, and that workers are going back to work, and that businesses are helped by that. And so it's really great to be here with you today. I have a bunch of material to cover, but I'm going to go through it quickly, and we can get on to questions. Really, this is about deter, protect, and secure. It's about deterring fraud and waste on the front end, protecting resources for the truly needy, and securing peace of mind for the taxpayers who fund these programs. And so I'm going to talk about a couple of your big welfare programs, Medicaid and the food stamp program, SNAP. And then Roy is going to cover a couple other programs, including unemployment, before we wrap up. If you could advance this slide, I just want to start with a little level set here real quick. And Representative Hamm just mentioned a couple of these numbers. But just to make sure we understand the scope of the programs we're going to talk about, you know, there are a lot of different welfare programs in the safety net, but the two big ones are Medicaid, which is not to be confused with Medicare. You know, some of your constituents may hear about both of those. Medicaid is not Medicare, different program. And then the food stamp program. And by the way, there's a farm bill going on in D.C. right now, and your fellow Pennsylvanian, G.T. Thompson, is the chair of that committee. The not-so-secret thing about the Farm Bill is that it's actually the food stamp bill, a big part of it. About 80% of the funding in there is the food stamp program. So big discussions around that happening right now. Just to walk through some of these numbers on the screen, to see where has Pennsylvania's safety net gone from 2000 to now, from the year 2000, so a couple decades. Food stamp enrollment was 760,000. You're at about 2 million today in that program. 1.2 million additional people on that program. The spending has gone from 655 million to over $4 billion in that program in just a couple decades. Your Medicaid program has gone from 1.3 million enrolled to about 3.3 million. We're going to get into that a little more. And the spending, this was already mentioned. These are all funds, by the way. This line right here is federal and state. $10 billion back in 2000, and you advance to today, and you're looking at a $47 billion line item in the Medicaid program. And just for contrast, we put there in the bottom row your population. So some of this could be explained by population growth. Well, that isn't really the case. You've added about 700,000 people in those same 20 years. So you've added double the number of people to the food stamp program as you've added to your state population in 20 years. What are public benefits for? This was mentioned by Representative Kale and Hamm. These benefits are for the truly needy, the disabled, the elderly, poor families. That's who the safety net was designed for originally. That's who it should be for today. You have 14,000 folks on a waiting list for care in your Medicaid program, disabled, intellectually and physically disabled individuals. That's what this is all about. At the end of the day, if you're stopping fraud, if you're saving money, it's to protect these folks and taxpayers. Next slide, please. Your governor seems to know this, or at least be aware of it. He's given at least some lip service here to this in the budget, where he's looking at some funding for these wait lists, those 14,000 people or the 2,000 folks on nursing home wait lists. But that's leaving out an important part of the story. You want to help these folks, and you want to take care of the elderly and the disabled, you can want that. But when able-bodied adults have taken over your program, there's not going to be anything left for the truly needy, let alone the taxpayers who are funding this all. And that's why we fight fraud, and that's why you need provisions to deter, protect, and secure in these programs. And I will say the very best way to ultimately to stop welfare fraud is to get more people off welfare and back to work and providing for themselves and their families. So that's not happening right now in PA. This is just a slide on the Medicaid growth, as you can see, over the last 20 years. Right now, it's a one-way ticket to Medicaid for all, is really how the program's being operated. And you know what those budget impacts look like. Next slide, please. If you can just advance a couple, or advance one on that, please. So this is your percentage, and Representative Ham mentioned this. You are number one in the nation. You're in first place, so to speak. 41, it sounds like now up to 42% of your budget is spent on the Medicaid program. Almost half your budget fully is going towards a welfare program in your state. And you can see some of your other mid-Atlantic states here. Maryland, 20% of the budget. Delaware, 21%. New Jersey. Those aren't exactly fiscally conservative states either. I don't have to tell you that. But you rank first in the nation in this category. You can understand the impact this has, right? Medicaid is gobbling up more and more your budget every year, and it ties up fundings for public safety, schools, roads, and the truly needy. If you could advance the slide, please. That's what your budget looks like. This is straight off your budget website. That yellow, mustard yellow there, that's HHS. It is eating alive your entire budget. Any other funding priority that taxpayers are paying for is being eaten up by welfare. Next slide, please. So you might hear from a colleague in Philadelphia, hypothetically, or maybe a hospital lobbyist, nonprofit CEO, well, all this growth in welfare is good because it's helping the truly needy. And there's some pockets of that in your communities for sure, but they're not telling you the entire picture. And so this is the makeup of your Medicaid program. And if you can just click through, I think it's 4 clicks. This is the percentage breakdown. You have 9% of your population is disabled, 18% are elderly, 30% are children, lower income children, and a full 43% of your Medicaid welfare program now is able-bodied adults. 43%. If you can go to the next slide. This is the total count. You have 1.5 million people here in Pennsylvania that are able-bodied adults. These are folks 18 to 65. Many of them, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, are folks without kids in the house that can and should be working, and they continue to be here on your Medicaid program. And I will say, I know in Maine, where I'm from, and where I was the Chief Operating Officer at the Maine Department of Health and Human Services, more than half of our able-bodied adults on the program are men without kids. So those are the folks that are driving up the spending here in this program. So what happens when these welfare programs expand? Well, you can see it here. We call it the X factor. When welfare goes up, work goes down. And the declining line here is labor force participation rate. And this is a national chart, but yours here in Pennsylvania looks very similar. As welfare has expanded, work participation has dropped. And so that's what we see over and over again. You want to talk about program integrity. A program meant for the truly needy is not only going to able-bodied adults, but it's keeping them out of work. And the governor can give more money to nursing homes if he wants in the budget, or propose funding for in-home care. But who's going to fill those jobs? where are those workers? They are those 1.5 million able-bodied adults in Pennsylvania. And nothing's being asked of them. There's no requirement that they do anything. They're getting the benefit and they're staying home. And to me, that's the definition of fraud. If you click to the next slide, you know, these are from Maine, but we saw a bunch of these driving in. You'll have these in your district, right? Help wanted signs everywhere. Just, can someone show up on time, stay to the end of the day? That's all. I'll train you. Every business out there is desperate for workers, and it's true here too. So that, to me, is the biggest issue you need to tackle in program integrity is let's get these folks off the sidelines and back to work and free up more of your public benefits. Next slide. Yeah, this slide's good. It's fraud, and it's by design. So this is a good example. Here in Pennsylvania, you already have a work requirement in place for able-bodied adults on the food stamp program. It's a federal law, but Pennsylvania, you're on a distinguished list here with a few other states, your administration has chosen to waive that requirement. This right now is all the way through summer 2024. So you can ask able-bodied adults with no kids in the house on food stamps to work part-time, be in training, or volunteer. That's allowed. Even the Biden administration has to let you do that. But you have specifically asked and received permission to cancel that work requirement across the state in 64 out of your 67 counties. That's fraud by design. You know, it's not the typical fraud we think of, but clearly it's taking away benefits from the truly needy and harming taxpayers. Next slide. This is more along the lines of the preserving the benefit integrity that you would normally think of. And I just want to mention something quickly here before I wrap up with some solutions. The national error rate in the Medicaid program is about 20%, $80 billion in fraud and waste across the country. Most of those are related to eligibility errors. I come in and ask for assistance. I give the wrong information on purpose or otherwise, and the department gives me the benefit. When you have all these able-bodied adults coming on the program, millions, you're driving up the work for the state folks who are processing all that eligibility, and that's where errors are made in your program. And by diminishing that caseload and getting those people back to work, you're helping solve this major problem. And I will say, the governor has recently made some claims about improving this error rate. And I know he knows there's fraud. As the representative said, he's kind of admitted that before. But he has claimed success on this front. He is using numbers from the COVID era where by federal law, you didn't have to check any eligibility in Medicaid. And it artificially drove down the error rate. And so I would be careful as you go into this conversation to really evaluate what is the true cost of fraud right now in the program, and not what it was when they weren't doing any checks or any renewals of eligibility during COVID. Your rate is much closer to the 20% national rate than it is the, I think, 5% the governor is claiming. So that's something you really want to keep your eye on here as you go. So next slide, just a couple examples of why does this happen? Why are these error rates high? You can see here Pennsylvania does not do a few things that it really should to be competitive on this front with states like Indiana. You accept self-attestation, for example, when someone applies for welfare. What does that mean? I come in and tell you I earn $0. You take my word for it. You say, okay, great. You earn $0, you're eligible. And then after you put me on the program, sometime along the way later, you're supposed to go back and verify your state eligibility folks. So you're letting me in the front door before you find out if I'm actually eligible. And you can imagine what kind of problems that leads to. So you do that on income and household composition and important factors of eligibility like that. That's how you get this kind of robbery of the safety net. Next slide, please. So those are some of the more policy-based ways that fraud is being committed. You have waivers of work requirement, and you have these things like self-attestation accepted. There's also the more traditional version, and this is what you hear from your constituents sometimes about what people are buying in the store and that they may be trading their food stamps. You need to go out and find and be aggressive with as a state to crack down on this kind of fraud. And you do have it. If you advance one, please. You have the issues here too. You have a great Inspector General here who's doing some good, they're doing some good work out of that office, better than some other states on fraud. It's still, I think, catching only a small percentage. But you've had 600 people here in 2023 charged with assistance fraud. And I just wanted to end on this case. Next click, please. End on this one case. This was from April of this year. This Shikshini woman was lying about her income to get food stamps, and I'm sure Pennsylvania accepted her self-attestation. She said that she didn't live with her husband anymore because his income would have been counted. Well, they did live together, and she bragged about it. Her quote was that she bragged about screwing the system. Very much intentional on her part, and stole several $1,000s. So it is happening here, and we've got a couple tools quickly I'd like to share that you can use to prevent some of this. Next slide, please. On the Medicaid side, I'm happy we can dig in more on questions on the details, but really basic stuff here. For three years, your agency didn't do anything to check eligibility as part of the COVID unwinding. Well, they've started going through that, and they've started getting some folks off the program who aren't eligible, but they're not being aggressive. And you've got hundreds of thousands still there that haven't been checked. You need to stop allowing self-attestation. It's just basic, right? Let's verify before we give someone benefits. This should be going to the truly needy. Robust data cross-checks, like I said, tell your agency, look, you got to check this EBT card data. Let's make sure people aren't in Florida 7 months out of the year with that card. Next slide, please. One other piece I wanted to mention, really important here, really important to think about. Those 1.5 million on Medicaid, able-bodied adults. Let's ask them to go back to work. Let's ask them to get in job training or volunteer at the local school in exchange for these valuable benefits that Pennsylvania taxpayers are providing. You may be able to do that with the right partner in Washington, D.C. Those work requirements in Medicaid were approved a few years ago, and that may be a possibility here again in 2025. You need to get ready for that now as a state if that's something that you would like to do. It's time to start formulating those plans and getting them ready for 2025. And then the last slide for me, if you can, on the food stamp side, there's two major things that you could do right now as a state and really turn the tide on protecting benefits for the truly needy. And that's eliminating what's called broad-based categorical eligibility, which is a really boring title for an afternoon meeting. But here's what it does. It eliminates the asset test. It means anyone in Pennsylvania can own anything, including cash in the bank, including a new RV in the yard, and still get on the food stamp program. They had no asset test whatsoever. You can have anything available to you. That's a state option. You could do away with that right now. And you could say, look, we want to help you if you're in need, but if you got a $50,000 RV in the yard you just bought, we're going to need you to go ahead and help yourself first before we ask taxpayers to help. And then the other thing is the work requirement I mentioned. You're making a decision as a state. You're through your governor's executive authority to waive that work requirement for almost 200,000 able-bodied adults with no kids in the house. You could ask them right now, hey, chip in a little bit. We're happy to help you if you need it, but you got to take some steps back to work. So I know I breezed through that as quickly as I could. There's a lot of information there, and I'm happy to talk more about it. I think these will be some great steps for Pennsylvania to protect the benefits for your truly needy. And I'm going to kick it over to Roy to finish up with a few things about the unemployment program and reining in government bureaucrats. Roy.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. It's great to be here in Pennsylvania, and I appreciate this opportunity. It's important work. Like Sam said, we do it in 30 states, and we're happy to be here in Pennsylvania. I'll be a little bit briefer because the bulk of what's going on, as Sam just covered. I want to just touch briefly on unemployment insurance program. And the most important number to remember is there are 450,000 open jobs right now in the state of Pennsylvania. Why does that matter? Well, open jobs are tough for businesses. If you want to have a vibrant workforce, if you want to be competitive with other states, and you want to keep your current companies here and attract new companies, you need to have a workforce that works. You can't bring in new companies and not be able to supply the workers. And we're finding that in a number of states that have some of the problems that you guys have here. So here is the problem. First of all, during the pandemic, if you look up there, I'll give you the national number, somewhere between insurance fraud was between somewhere between 100 billion and 135 billion just in fraud alone on the unemployment insurance program. It's worth mentioning just a caveat. Unemployment insurance is paid by your businesses and no one else. It is not a employee, the state does not kick in, the employee does not kick in, that's a tax on your local businesses, so that money is gone. Here in Pennsylvania alone, a little over $1 billion was lost to UI fraud in 20 and 21, and $6 billion was lost during the federal pandemic to UI fraud. So that money could be better spent somewhere else, I think, particularly with the businesses. So super easy to get to the solutions here. Verify who's getting the checks. It's not rocket science. The department does do some of these things now. You should codify it, put it in law, and make sure that it continues so it's not an option, but it's state law. And that's what most states are doing. So you guys already have ID Me. It's not a complicated tool. It's available. You don't need a new computer system that costs $199 million and will be ready to go in 2030. You can do it now and get going on that. Another issue here is you need to maybe think about fewer weeks to find a job. So you got a half a year off now with 450,000 open jobs. That seems to be a disconnect to us. That if you have 450,000 open jobs and a low unemployment rate and you're still offering folks 26 weeks of benefits, you might want to rethink what you're doing, and that's exactly what states have been doing. So why does that matter? So states with indexing see people cycle off unemployment and return to work much more quickly. North Carolina, when they changed it to 12 weeks, they cycled off the program nearly twice as fast, and the same thing happened in Kansas and Florida as well. We know it works. It also means that you have a stronger workforce and much lower unemployment insurance taxes. If you want to give businesses a tax break, this is a way to do it. Get people back to work. North Carolina, again, saw their costs decrease nearly 87%, and employer taxes dropped by 75%. Very similar in story in Florida as well. And we have, by the way, I should say, all of this data is on the FGA.org, so folks listening and for you all, that all of this data is there with the sources for you. And the other thing is the Unemployment Trust Fund. After North Carolina's trust fund, they saw an upward swing of $5.7 billion. The state paid off its loan to the federal government and remained in the black. Kansas has increased by 900% to nearly $1 billion. A secure trust fund is a big deal to you, who ultimately bear the burden of an insecure trust fund, and to your folks in the businesses who bear the burden of the tax when it's not funded properly. So the next things I want to talk about real quickly is you need to look for work more often. I think you have Work Search now is three times a week here in Pennsylvania. We think if a work week is 5 days, you could look for 5 things a week, go from 3 to 5. It turns out the more you look for work, the more likely you are to get a job. I know that seems incomprehensible. Again, 450,000 open positions. The other one is show up for interviews. I don't know if you guys ever hear from your businesses, but it's called ghosting, and that they're checking boxes and saying, yes, I'm interviewed, give me my check. They're not showing up. We think that if you're ghosting a potential employer, you're violating federal law because you're not meeting the requirements, and you should not get your benefits. And then the last thing is lock out for fraudsters like Medicaid and food stamps. There's a lot of fraud, and we have a litany of it on our website that you can go see. If you're convicted and found out to have fraudulently taken money from the unemployment system, we think you should have a 10-year lockout. You're not eligible. And that's sort of a way to sort of make it clear that it's not tolerated in these states. So these reforms work. That's the important thing. You're not alone here. Georgia, Tennessee, Kansas, Florida, North Carolina. These aren't just states. This is your competition. This is your competition. New businesses, new jobs. You got states like Mississippi. They're all rolling. Oh, Iowa, all are getting on the bandwagon now and realizing that the strong workforce makes your job a lot easier when trying to attract new businesses. Let me just go to the last thing. This is called RAINS. It's reining, it's the next slide, if you don't mind. Reining in executives in need of scrutiny. I like that name. It's very complicated. If the new rule costs $1 million over 5 years, it's got to come back to the legislature for final approval. You are literally saying to the bureaucracy, government by bureaucracy is now over in the state of Pennsylvania. I strongly encourage you to make that one of your priorities in 2025 as you think about that. I'll give you a little bit of detail. So here's the problem, just to give you it in a nutshell. It's outdated regulations are clogging up your bill. So we found some things, for example, there's an entire chapter of the administrative code in Idaho, which has fixed that was about a snail that does not live in the state of Idaho. Ohio had more than 240 rules on the books regarding lottery games that were no longer played, and Missouri required car dealers to have a landline. Now, I'm just giving you some silly things, but it's millions of words. In fact, one way of measuring this volume of regulations is just count the words in the state's administrative code. All of our favorite state, California, has more than 22 million words of administrative code that businesses in California are expected to follow. And as you know, it's going really well for Texas. And so across the board, the average state administrative code is about 9.4 million words long per state, just to give some perspective. So that's about a 13-week job just to read through the state code full time. So it's a big problem. So does RAINS work? That's really the question here. If you go to the next slide, I'll just give you the real world example of Florida, for example. Their policy is over 2 years, if it costs $1 million, you need now to come back to the legislature. We'll just look at the numbers, how they have dropped significantly from 2,500 down to 1,200 over that same time. It changes fundamentally the behavior of departments and agencies and how they do stuff. It also puts the legislature back in the driver's seat. Everything comes back to you if it costs money. And once they realize that, they rethink what it is that they're doing. So we believe that legislative oversight is a great way to sort of preserve the benefit of living in this state by being able to open up a business, run a business, and do anything else in state government. So that's really important. You know, I'll just close by this. COVID exacerbated a problem that we're seeing all over the country, and that's where we have begun to believe this myth that we're co-equal branches of government. There's no such thing as that. We're divided government, and the legislature is the supreme branch. Everything comes through you. You make all the laws. You can override the governor's veto. The legislature is a supreme branch. And COVID set this signal, and this rulemaking sends this signal that you're the help. You're not. You're the boss. And so what we're encouraging legislators in every state is to take back control. You're the only person that folks in your district have to oversee government and to hold it accountable. And that's why we're really grateful to be here today. Preserving benefit integrity starts with the legislature holding them accountable for that integrity. There is no other way around it. You are the most important part of preserving benefit integrity, because if it's not you, it's no one. And so we're delighted to be here. Sam will answer all your questions. Anything I said that was true or untrue, he'll correct, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, gentlemen. Representative Ham. Oh, actually, we also had Representative Shern join us virtually as well. Representative Ham. Oh, and Representative Stender, sorry. Forgot. Representative Ham.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your testimony. Some startling information and data there for us. But this isn't a new issue to us, and it's one that we're working on, and we have legislation already in place or in the process. I have House Bill 421, which would require the Department of Human Services to use already collected government data, literally already collected government data, to verify, and basically it's requiring cross checks, right, for benefits. And so that's all I'm asking them to do, is literally take data they already have and verify, whether someone actually lives in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, right? Whether somebody is incarcerated, whether someone is employed and has income, whether someone's dead, and lastly, if they have some sort of lottery winnings that they're not, sharing. And so we as a caucus have been working on this issue. We have the legislation. Getting that legislation moved has certainly been a challenge for us. And but I thank you for all the data. And my question is there, how can we better align our welfare benefits with job training and employment opportunities to help Pennsylvanians achieve financial independence? Because I think that's where we need to go. That's what I heard from your testimony. We've got to make sure we're putting Pennsylvanians in the best position possible to achieve financial independence and not dependency on the government. And so can you just tell me any opportunities for us to work towards that?
Yeah, thank you, Representative. That's an excellent bill. By the way, that would put you at the top tier, kind of the benchmark of states where you need to be on verification in the country. So excellent legislation. On your question, so having seen the Department of Health and Human Services in Maine as Deputy Commissioner there, here's how I see it, is that, and we see this at FGA, the better day for someone is when they get their first paycheck rather than their first welfare check, right? That's the bottom line. We all know there are people in need, but we know that that's the best path, the one out of dependency into self-sufficiency. And what happens is, we call it health and human services, and then we never talk to these folks. There's no human part of it at all. We send them a plastic card in the mail, and we say, good luck. And then maybe a year later, they come back and ask for it again, and we send them another plastic card. Well, that's a failure. That's a failure. If we want to actually help lift someone up, let's engage them as a state. There are millions, billions of dollars being spent on job education, training, your community colleges, your work centers, your career centers. It's out there. And you know what they will tell you if you go talk to them? Well, we have trouble with participation. Well, the reason is because we're giving able-bodied adults benefits without any requirement whatsoever to pursue that job training, that, adult education, that first job or next job. And so to me, the most sympathetic, charitable thing you can do is say, yeah, we're going to give you a benefit, but in exchange, you need to show up Monday at this job training, and we're going to help get you on the path out. So this isn't a lifetime sentence to this benefit, that you're actually going to be able to take care of yourself and your family. So there's plenty of opportunity out there. To me, it starts with the requirement to help get them along on their way.
Let me just add, Representative, one other thing. Remember the number that Sam brought up earlier, 14,000 people who absolutely need benefits are on waiting lists right now in your state. I would approach this working with the governor. I would ask for them a complete accounting of that waiting list. Who is it? Why are they waiting? And I would just say, look, let's just agree. Let's put in HB 421. You can keep the money. Let's buy down the waiting list. To me, that's the trade. I would make the debate about what Sam said is getting people back to work and caring, not recharging a card, but actually caring, and then buying down the waiting list and checking in on your nursing homes. That's the trade here. That's what you're asking this governor to do by supporting, and the Democrats to support HB 421, is to let's help the truly needy. That's what this bill is. This bill isn't just about accountability. It's about refocusing back to the truly needy.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Representative Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you guys very much. I love this stuff. It's fascinating. I've been through a couple of different FGA seminars, and every single time they're really interesting, but also really depressing, because you realize just how far behind the eight ball Pennsylvania is. You referenced some other states that are doing great, right? You referenced North Carolina, I think some other states that are doing just a great job of cleaning up their roles and doing things the right way. And then by comparison, we have Pennsylvania that's so far behind the eight ball. What happened from the point of, was there a point that one of the Carolinas was in the position we are, and what changed? Because this seems like it should be pretty easy, right? You want to take benefits that are meant for people who need it, eliminate those waiting lists, and get people that don't need it back to work, right? We have a huge labor shortage, hundreds of thousands of people that should be working that aren't, like your slide showed, help wanted signs everywhere. So from my perspective, it seems like it should be really easy to just say, give the programs to the people who need it, get the people who don't need it back to work, eliminate labor shortages, everybody wins. But that's not what's happening. So my question to you is, why is that? Is it just political? Is that, say, some executive who wants to be a governor again or maybe president doesn't want to be the bad guy that kicks 200,000 people off of a benefit that's currently being subsidized? Is it just that simple, or is there something that we're missing here?
Yeah, thank you, Representative. Good question. And I would say North Carolina does a good job on unemployment, which unemployment insurance benefits, which is what Roy was talking about. Not so great on welfare. So just to clarify that. The states, though, like you were describing, they have this hallmark, the ones who do a good job with welfare programs. Florida is a good example. Texas does a good job. They have some really basic principles, which is benefits are going to be only for the truly needy. They didn't expand Medicaid to able-bodied adults. They don't allow able-bodied adults to stay on the program unless they're working. Texas, if you show up and ask for food stamps in Texas and you're a 30-year-old man, they're going to say, you report Monday to your new work opportunity. And they make sure they follow through on that. So that's the first principle is benefits are for the truly needy. They're a temporary hand up, not a lifetime handout for those who can and should go to work. And then on the fraud side, they say, look, we're happy to give out benefits to people that need them, but we are going to check everything up front. We're not going to bend to the pressure from Washington, D.C. that says, hand it all out immediately and ask questions later. And that gets you in the situation you described, which is once you get everyone on the program, it's kind of hard to take that benefit away. So that's from a political standpoint and from a practical standpoint, that's why you need to move all that verification up to the front end and say, we're going to go the Ronald Reagan way and trust but verify. So yeah, we want to help, but let us check a few things first. So those are the hallmarks. Refocus your program so it's on the truly needy, elderly, disabled, and poor kids. Make sure able-bodied adults are going back to work, and then move all verification up to the front end wherever possible.
Representative, I'll just add also this. What you're doing, every state, and I've worked in these states for 12 years now, it always started with leadership. People saying, we're going to focus on this, we're going to make it a priority, we're going to do something about it. So the one thing they all have in common is executive branch, either a governor or legislative leaders like in Kansas who said, enough. We're going to make sure what Sam just said happens. So none of it happens without you guys. None of it. And that's why we're here today. That's why we're happy to be here.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing. Thank you, Representative Ham.
Representative Valette.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative Ham, for this this hearing. I was just curious. I was trying to think through what other areas of life would self-attestation work, and I can't think of anything. So I don't know if that's maybe a question. I mean, it wouldn't work in our taxes. That would be a failure. Healthcare, that really wouldn't work. Inspecting my vehicle, that probably wouldn't work. So I guess it's shocking to me to see that this is, I mean, there are steps that we need to take. Are there any other areas of this self-attestation that we could use as an example that would help people understand the extent of what we see happening here in Pennsylvania? And I have a couple other questions too, Mr. Chairman, if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks, Representative. I'll just give you a quick answer on that. I think your examples were good, right? Like we all have paperwork. If you pay household bills or apply for anything, you know, I put my kids in school, I have to verify that I'm related to them. You know, everyday stuff you have to produce information to verify. Here's the real issue, and where I think the Pennsylvania legislature can really help make some improvements. Those bizarre type of policies that we're highlighting that leave you scratching your head, most of them are created in Baltimore and in Washington, D.C. by the federal government, who really runs these programs. And, you know, we think of them as state programs. They're not. They're federal. They're pulling the policy levers. And they come up, we call it fraud by design. They're coming up with these concepts and then pushing them down on you, making you do them. They're saying, hey, we'll give you these billions of dollars, but you're going to run this our way. And they pressure, and they give options, and then they lean on states to do these kinds of things. And so one of the key pieces of this is don't let policy be created without your oversight. Don't, you know, when there's a state plan amendment filled out in Medicaid, right now it's going from someone in Harrisburg to someone in Baltimore. You all never see it. And neither do the folks funding the program, the taxpayers. As soon as you get in there and say, wait a minute, why are we doing this? We have an option on this, things start to turn. And that's what we've seen in other states. So it becomes a little more clear why an idea like that could advance when you understand who's making it. And it's a little less surprising that something like that would exist when you know it's coming from DC, where bad ideas come from.
So I'm just thinking about this as well. I mean, we do have people though that want to fraud the system. I mean, we know that's in existence. I was at a addiction counseling center this morning, and we talked at length about just generational addiction issues. Is that part of this conversation too? How do we change that culture where the dependence on government and just looking for that? I totally agree on there's policy initiatives that we as the state legislature need to work on, but there are cultural issues that need to be happening as well. I'm trying to get my boys specifically, to clean their room. Like, it was a mess last night. I go in there and I tell them they need to, but until there's a cultural change where they see it for what it is, I'm sure Josh doesn't have that problem. But I don't, you know what I mean? Like, I can say it till I'm blue in the face, but it doesn't happen, and I have to put incentives in place, and I do my best to help them. But how do we have that conversation, and where does that have to happen? Is it in our schools? I mean, is it in the, you know, where does that cultural change happen that also will help just with this general drive to work and be out there looking for the next best thing for folks, and how awesome it is to actually be supporting your family on your own?
Yeah, it's a great question. If you figure out the room cleaning question, I got 3 boys too, so let me know. I could use some help with that. I tried putting in a work requirement on them, and no, it's a huge issue, right? It is cultural. I think on the welfare side, 2 things I would say is the messaging is important. We saw in Maine, we had a chief executive, Governor Paul LePage, who talked about it a lot. He grew up on welfare, and he would talk about it, and he'd say, look, we're not going to do that here anymore. We're going to go to work, and we're going to stop you if you're committing fraud. We actually had a guy in jail. We got it on a recording, a jailhouse recording. He's talking to his mom, and he's like, Mom, you gotta fill out this paperwork because I need my food stamp card refilled while he's in jail. And she said, son, I can't do that anymore. The new governor, he's cracking down on that.
Yeah.
We can't do that anymore. And so a big part of it is just saying it out loud, like, hey, we're going a new direction here. We're going to help the truly needy, but we're going to stop this other foolishness. So I do think talking about it, this type of venue and you all talking in your communities about it is important. And then the other piece is just you stop the trend. Those kids that are seeing their parents not go to work, they can afford to not go to work because we're making it easy. We're letting them self-attest and giving them all kinds of benefits. And President Biden raised the food stamp amount by 30% without Congress last year. So it pays better than ever to be on the programs. But if we can stop that cycle of dependency by saying, hey, your kids need to see you go to work. And we're not going to give you this benefit unless you go to work. And you can stop it in one generation. I can't imagine if I hadn't seen my parents get up and go to work every day, without that example, you kind of don't have an anchor. So I'd say talk about it a lot and put policies in place that break that cycle.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Representative, I would only add to what Sam has said. Don't look for the silver bullet. Put a quiver on your back and fill as many arrows as possible and take the welfare piece down. Do not think that like HB 421, there's a lot of good stuff in there. That's a lot of things that will change the fact that people are going to get up and go to work, right? Work is a miracle. Food on your table, clothes on your back, roof over your head. We're bought and built by work. You're denying people the American dream. You're going to reestablish the American dream for folks here in Pennsylvania. And that's the most moral, righteous thing that you can do. But we've been told we're unrighteous or immoral for demanding that people go back to work. And by the way, it is very popular with voters. I don't remember what the vote was in Wisconsin. Was it 73%? 80% of the voters, they had a referendum on, advisory referendum on work requirements. 80% of the voters supported work requirements. You are in good territory. It is not about class or race or sex or party. It is a universal, people still believe that work matters. And so I think what you do is you just get as many things as possible, you get them moving. And that's what happened in 1996 with Clinton and Gingrich. Those guys loaded it up, changed the entire culture of welfare in one congressional session. I think that's what we need to see start happening in states, and it is happening in the states. But, you even have a state like South Carolina that's now calling their unemployment agency the Department of Reemployment. Clever, right? So the job of the bureaucrats now in South Carolina, formerly unemployment agency, is to find people jobs, which gets to Sam's thing, change the culture where EBT card is righteous, right? As opposed to helping them find a job and then helping them with food. So it's a lot of work, but use every tool imaginable.
No, I appreciate that. And culture eats strategy for breakfast. So if we can change the culture, that is so important to what it. When we can, the policy is important, the culture is important. I think we need to do both. I think you've talked a lot about it. One of the things that we're working on is a driver's license bill, making it. We did a survey in one of my school districts. 20% of the kids that are eligible for their driver's license don't have it and have no desire to get it. In a rural community, that's huge if you want to be employed. But they probably aren't seeing it from home either. And so, that's something that we're working with, the Department of Transportation to figure out if, the knowledge test is something we could do in our schools. I think we can do that. New York State's doing it. It makes sense. Anything we can do to help that culture that, listen, driving is important. How do we make sure that students realize that? And if they're not getting it from home, we can help as well, and being positive about the conversation about work and driving and whatever it is. But talking about how positive it is and the energy that you can find from work is very important. So appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Stender.
First, thank you, Representative Ham, for this and the speakers for this informational hearing. It's all very helpful. I actually had a family member who used to work for the state assistance office, and we had a long discussion one time about some of the tests here that people just didn't have to prove how much money they had. It was something at that time the governor just said, we don't care if you have money in your bank account, we're just not asking. So but I do want to try to focus some of this fraud by design. Is there, I guess, sometimes when you're trying to eat eat the elephant, right? Well, the one bite at a time. Are you seeing different things that may, I don't want to say easier, but small changes, what are some of the smaller changes that really can help us really preserve some tax dollars or really shift some of these programs to the people who are in greater need? I guess that's what, could you clarify like some of the programs that you see that really do help more?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a long list. They're not all here in this PowerPoint, but particularly on the Medicaid side, there's so much around eligibility and renewals. So when you apply, and then a year later when you're up for a renewal, coming out of COVID, one of the things Pennsylvania has done, which other states have too, is they've employed something called an ex parte renewal, which I don't know why we switched to Latin for this particular thing in Medicaid, but they decided to. I think to make it sound more innocuous. Basically what it does is the department goes out, ex parte is on behalf of, they go out on behalf of the applicant or the enrollee, and they try to find information they can that would make them eligible. And if they find that information via data check or whatever, and it says they are eligible, then they'll go ahead and re-enroll them without reaching out to them, without any back and forth verification. If they don't find information to re-enroll them, then they go talk to them and try to find it. So you see how that works? It's one direction. If they can find info to re-enroll, they do. If they can't find information, then they go try again with them directly. So it's an example of you have tens, if not hundreds of thousands of folks that have been re-enrolled from COVID based on ex parte renewal, and no one ever talked to them or exchanged information with them. And not all states do that. Some states say, no, we're going to go through the traditional process of you send in a renewal form that you fill out. You do a mix of both, but we can go down the list. We don't have time today, but we can work with you on that. There's all these little tweaks that can be made. Here in Pennsylvania, generally, you lean towards the DC model of retention and coverage and consumer, treating it more like the end goal is to keep as many people on as possible versus let's only cover the truly needy and truly eligible.
And let me just add, so you understand how severe this is, to talk about your neighbors to the west here in Ohio. The state auditor there, and I would encourage you to look at that report. I'm happy to provide it to members. The state auditor just issued a report. I'm not sure it's even completely public yet, but it's coming out. He decided to look at the Medicaid rolls in the state of Ohio. He found 120,000 residents in the state of Ohio that were concurrently enrolled in Medicaid program in other states as well. It cost them over $1 billion in a 2 to 3 year period. I don't remember the exact number. So the state auditor in Ohio, totally independent, did the check that department should be doing, found 120,000 Ohioans, many of them right here, I'm sure, registered to get Medicaid in both states. Now you say, well, why would they do that?
Yeah, and just to add to that, if back on that fraud by design slide, you do accept self-attestation for residency. So all I have to do is tell you that I live in Pennsylvania, and I'm a Pennsylvania resident. You don't say, hey, can you show me a light bill or whatever the typical thing that would happen in these other life circumstances. And Ohio does the same thing, and they've come up with these hundreds of thousands of people that are getting benefits in both states. So
and it's not rocket science. I mean, to your thing, it's what some things on the list. I mean, I think the first question is, do you live in our state? Can you prove that? Now, there's plenty of data sets out there that can click a button, run a list, click a button, they can tell you immediately. That's what the auditor in Ohio did. But do you live here? A really great question. That'd be one. Number two, are you living? Because remember, in a managed care organization, they're getting so many $100 per month per member. They don't care what it's not about services. You're just sending checks to managed care organizations per member per month. whether they live here or not.
Thank you. No, that's very helpful. I don't disagree with that. I know, just for some other programs, we typically have to prove that we live here. So, no, I appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much for the information.
Representative Ledbetter.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for your testimony this afternoon, gentlemen. The work that FGA does is certainly valued across the nation, and my sentiment aligns with that this afternoon. I believe my question was answered earlier. Mr. Alfson, you were going through your slides and you advocated for more robust data cross-checks. And my question was going to be that if we are to prioritize our efforts here in the legislature, what would be some of the most effective data cross-checks? But given your testimony a moment ago, ending self-attestation, ensuring that people live in the Commonwealth and that they are indeed alive, seem to be some of the, pardon the cliche, but lowest hanging fruit given the fraud that's here. I mean, we have over 1.5 million recipients of this within the Commonwealth. Am I correct in that assessment, or would there be other data cross-checks that you guys would prioritize as higher than that, or is that accurate?
Yeah, thanks, Representative, for the question. Yeah, that's right. You do the basic verification up front. All you do is you slide it to the left, right? Right now, you're accepting somebody's self-attestation, and then somewhere down the road, maybe checking on it. Just move it up front. It's a state option. It's a box you check. Yes, we're going to verify first and enroll second. Those 1.5 million able-bodied adults, they're the most likely to commit fraud. They're moving around. Their eligibility errors are involved in that group. One of the really specific things, and maybe this answers the previous question a little bit too, that I found the most effective is track your EBT cards. It's the simplest thing ever. For example, if you have a card that shows up spending only in another state for 2 straight months, they don't live here anymore. And you're not catching that until their next annual review a year later. But if your department would go through that every month and with the red flag and say, hey, all right, this card right here has only purchased in Ohio for 2 straight months, you run a case review on that and you shut them down. And I guarantee you, I almost guarantee you, just for legal purposes, that person's also on Medicaid, right? So you think of the food stamp program, well, it's federal money, no big deal. Even though we have a $35 trillion deficit and we're all federal taxpayers. But that person is also on Medicaid. And you're paying the $600 per member per month for that person. And if they moved, that's a way that you can catch them. And it's a simple database to check. So I'd start right there. Department, you will, every quarter, initiate closure with anyone who's spent only outside of Pennsylvania with their EBT card. Simple.
Yeah, and let me just add, Representative, and the reason that's important, and just to follow up on Sam's red flag, one of the things the department will do is they'll come back and say, we can't check all 3 or 4 million people. It's too much work. There are really basic, obvious things you can start with and go get the low-hanging fruit, and it turns out that's 80% of the problem. Do you live here is a lot of the problem. Are you alive is a lot of the problem, right? And so last time I checked, you guys have income taxes. I live in Florida. And so you know what people are making here in this state. Do you have income? Well, you don't have to guess. You already have you collect that data. So the department will push back and say it's an enormous burden. Do you live here is not an enormous burden. It's just not. And so, Sam's point about moving it to the left, I always just like to say, take the screen door off the submarine and return the hatch. You can get in when the hatch is open, but a screen door on a submarine, you're sinking, and it's going to continue.
Gentlemen, I appreciate it. You certainly can't buy tobacco or alcohol, and there's guardrails in place currently with EBT cards, so I'll look forward to collaborating with my colleagues and introducing legislation and points of policy that can help address this. So thank you for your contribution this afternoon. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Representative Ham.
All right. Any other questions? I know this is the first of many hearings we're going to have on this topic. So I do have a couple of comments and a question, but if anyone else has questions, looks like we're good. Look, I'm just sitting here thinking, we're talking about taxpayer dollars, right? We start thinking in Harrisburg as though this is monopoly money, that it just comes and goes. But can you imagine running a business like this without any type of oversight? And the technology that we have to follow everything now, the use of AI, we had a hearing on AI and how we could really use that to make things more efficient. And I'm just thinking, how could we apply it to this? And Mr. Leonardson, I think what you said, really what it comes down to is excellence in government is about accountability. And when you're just delegating everything to bureaucrats, there is no accountability in government. And it's one of the major problems that we have. I spoke on this a couple of weeks ago, and we see it in every area of our government, especially at the federal level, but also at the state level. We are delegating so much of our authority to this fourth headless branch of government. And we as legislators see this all the time, right? And I can think of during COVID, when unemployment, the system was just broke, and people are calling our office. And what happens? Well, we tell them what's going on. The bureaucracy isn't working. And it's like, well, can't you do something? It's like, well, actually, no, we can't do anything because the bureaucracy is not working. And so you have this strange situation where we get to blame everything on an unelected group of people. Our constituents get upset at us, but we tell them it's these people, and everyone seems to just go along their merry way in government. And when there is no accountability, like you have in so many areas, it's not just that area, but so many areas, it becomes this system that is unmanageable. And it's unfortunate because it's more philosophical than just those particular instances. You're destroying the underpinning for the rule of law when you're delegating all of this authority, because we have to run for election every 2 years. And if we do something stupid, our constituents can throw the bums out and get somebody else in there to fix it. When you delegate your authority to people that can't be thrown out, some people wonder if a governor could even throw them out at this point, or a president could throw them out at this point. It really changes how the system was intended to operate. And I never really considered it in this context, but you raising it here really, it makes sense. And I look at this graph of who is on Medicaid. 43% able-bodied adults. That's what Medicaid is. I mean, the purpose for at least those 43% of our state agency ought to be self-defeating. That the goal is to get them off of Medicaid, because these individuals have value, they have self-worth, and we need to find a way to give them confidence to go out there and be productive members of society, and that ought to be the agency's goals. So I appreciate you coming here and sharing some about this, and I do have a question built into this, I promise, but I wanted to mention one other thing before I got to that question. You'd mentioned about leadership and it taking people really focused on these issues, and that's really what we're doing here, is building a record for these issues so that when we do retake the calendar, we have some convictions behind what we're doing, that we have facts and stats and things that show us why we want to do what we do. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention Chairman Grove has been talking about these issues for some time, and there have been other members within our caucus as well. And he brought a lot of this to my attention and to other people's attention. And my goodness, just seeing this stuff like this, it really is going to heighten a sense of urgency within our caucus. So I do appreciate you coming here and sharing these things. And I'm looking forward to the next couple of hearings. On that note, and I know it's kind of what Representative Stender got at, but I wanted to dig into it a little bit more, because in Pennsylvania, incrementalism is revolutionary. And it's just, you got to take small steps on things, one step at a time. In your experience with other states, is there a state out there that went from a type of Pennsylvania-ish state and then has changed over time? And where did they begin? And is there something that we could mimic as we go forward? And this might be a question for other hearings down the road if you think more about it, but I wanted to get it out there.
Sure. Thank you, Representative Kale, and I appreciate your comments. Representative Grove has been excellent on this issue as well, so we appreciate that work. Kansas is a good example. Kansas had really reached kind of the top tier of welfare dependency back in the 2008, 2009, 2010. Maine was in a similar position. When a new chief executive came in to Kansas and really spearheaded an effort, it was largely built around what we talked about today, which first and foremost was get people off the sidelines and back to work. I think the key steps in both the Kansas and Maine story were to acknowledge there's an issue here. We can't continue on this path. We cannot. Something has to change, right? That was the first step I know in Kansas. They just said it can't go on like this because those trend lines all go up. And if you ever want to cut taxes, if you ever want to, add more funding to education, something's got to change. That was the first step, and I think right behind that was what you all are talking about. It's how do you solve a problem you can't measure, right? And you need to start getting your arms around the information. You need to know what the folks in the agency are talking about with the folks in DC. You need to know the trend lines and the state options that are available to you that maybe you aren't being told about, that we're talking about today. So knowing you got to change direction, figuring out what the levers are that you can pull, and then it was, I think, a lot of buy-in from folks in the community who really know there's a better way, there's a better path forward. And I think in Kansas, they got out and talked to folks about it aggressively and started moving the ball forward. So a lot of specifics behind that, and we love to continue to work with you on what those are and what other states are seeing, but Kansas really turned it around, and so did Maine from that point forward. Now they've backslidden a bit in recent years, I would say, in Maine in particular, but Kansas has really seen a great change. They just dropped their income tax, or they're working on moving their income tax rate down there as a result of some of their welfare savings.
Yeah, and I would also add Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi are making changes. But let me just say, me and another guy started FGA 12 years ago, and we were laughed out of the room. There's no such thing as welfare fraud. You're lying. Why do you hate poor people? Just all of this stuff. We got nowhere. Now we're in 32 states. We're sitting in front of folks like you. So for me, it's not just incrementalism, it's radical incrementalism for me, because we have really moved this ball. We're not defensive that there is welfare fraud anymore. We're expending all of our time explaining it, educating legislators. So it's been an incremental trip for us just as well. And so from my perspective, we are so far down the field. I'm an eternal optimist, but I think that this hearing today is a demonstration of how far we have come. This would not have happened 10 years ago. You would not be sitting here in a room in central Pennsylvania talking about this issue. This is all a result of incrementalism and people finally waking up and understanding what's happening. So I just add that.
I appreciate you coming here and testifying, and I can assure you that in our caucus, we'd like to cut taxes as well. But we also want to make sure that people that need these benefits are getting these benefits, and you all have shown us a path to start that trend and to go down that road. Thank you for being here. Representative Rowe, if you'd like to give some Representative Ham, if you'd like to give, that's insulting, I know, I apologize. Representative Ham, if you'd like to give some brief closing remarks.
I was not insulted at all. Representative Rowe is an amazing colleague and one that should be emulated. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for this hearing. Thank you for the work that the Policy Committee is doing, bringing issues forward that impact millions of Pennsylvanians, and these issues are things that we should be talking about. And so I appreciate the Policy Committee, but I appreciate your work, Mr. Chairman, in doing that. And thank you for bringing it to the 84th House District. I appreciate that. I want to thank Sam and Roy from the Foundation for Government Accountability for being here, for your testimony, for your expertise in preserving benefit integrity. You guys said it perfectly, right? Deter, protect, secure. Deter bad actors. Protect benefit integrity. and secure those benefits for the truly needy. And the data you've provided today tell us that we need to deter, protect, and secure 14,105 disabled individuals in this Commonwealth who can't get help, but we have 1.5 million able-bodied individuals who are taking benefits. That's a crime. That, in my opinion, is criminal. That I have 14,000 people in this Commonwealth who can't get help, but I have 1.5 million sitting on the rolls, able-bodied adults. 43%, the number blew me out of the water. I cannot believe that 43% of those on Medicaid in Pennsylvania are able-bodied adults. So this is the first step. This hearing was important to bring this issue forward. And, I think we need to get to a place where we're giving temporary hand up and not a lifetime handout. So thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, Representative Ham, you said it well there. I mean, we are laying a foundation for when we do have the calendar and we can make the changes we need to have excellence within our government, to make sure that every dollar that a taxpayer gives to the government is spent in an appropriate way, in a way that it's intended to be spent with integrity. So thank you all for being here. I'm looking forward to continuing this series. The Policy Committee is continuing this series of hearings across the state to discuss excellence in government, preserving benefit integrity. Tomorrow, May 30th, we'll be in Jefferson County with Representative Brian Smith. And then, of course, on Wednesday, June 5th, we'll be in Harrisburg for our third and final hearing. Until then, this committee is adjourned.